everyone, and welcome to Wine.com Experiences. As you can see by our extra fancy garb, we are celebrating the eve of the Kentucky Derby, which happens tomorrow. And since we cannot all be there to celebrate and host the event, we are going to walk you through the bubbles, wine, and bourbon that you'd be sipping should you be there in person. If you purchase the wines and or bourbon from Wine.com to taste along with us, fantastic. Please go ahead and get those open, get them into some glassware. We're going to be having those 3 wines and some bourbon. I encourage you to just get them all out now because you can enjoy them tomorrow if you don't finish them this evening. So that said, you can also always revisit this video on our Wine.com YouTube channel. It lives there forever and ever. The 3 wines that we are tasting in order are the G.H. Mumm Cordon Rouge Champagne, Chateau Ste. Michelle Chardonnay, and Cabernet Sauvignon. And we will finish off with a fantastic bourbon from Woodford Reserve. We have some wonderful guests joining us, which I'd like to bring in now. We have Elise Cordell, National Ambassador for G.H. Mumm, Bob Berteau, Head Winemaker at Chateau Ste. Michelle, and Chris Morris, Master Distiller at Woodford Reserve. Welcome, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you so much all for being here. We are so excited to have you. Happy Derby days.
Good day and happy Friday.
Virtual Derby days. Exactly.
Yeah, it's the first time we've ever had a Kentucky Derby while we're picking grapes for harvest. But this is definitely a new experience.
It's true. It's a very different time and place and situation, and we are doing the best we can. At least we still get to our house.
Yep.
Yes. We're not physically there, but I'm excited to be able to taste with you all of what we'd all be sipping and enjoying while watching the race in person. And of course, we're going to start with some bubbles. So Elise, we will start with the champagne, G.H. Mumm. Can you give us a little bit of history about this winery, G.H. Mumm? What makes it such a unique champagne?
Absolutely. So G.H. Mumm actually has history going all the way back to 1827. So we're coming up on 2 centuries here. We're on the northern side of Champagne, so in Reims, and we focus a lot on Pinot Noir as our signature grape. Now, during that founding, it was a German family. They came over from the Rhine region, but it wasn't until 1852 when George Herman Mumm, hence the GH in the name, took over that really kind of took everything to new heights because his personal mantra was only the best. And so he wanted to put that through the entirety of his business, like whether it was the vineyards, whether it was, the types of practices they had in the winery, and then of course, best practices for marketing and then selling worldwide. But we continue to use that as our personal mantra. And then of course, really incorporating the ideas of innovation. That's the thing that we've always kind of kept true. So taking those risks and finding those things that set us apart. So whether it was purchasing vineyards, we still own over 200 hectares, about 160 of those are Grand Cru. Our most popular one is Verzenay. If you've ever seen the Moulin de Verzenay in photos of Champagne, that is our property. Then of course, using stainless steel for fermentation. We were also one of the first people to do that. And we carried through even until creating this new bottle, the Grand Cordon, which took about 5 years of research and development to create, because of course, nothing in France ever happens quickly. Yeah. We also had to age the champagne in order to make sure that it was going to work. But now that iconic red sash, which is so appropriate for the Derby, is now indented directly into that bottle, which made it a very cool innovation for the champagne.
I love that. Well, first, I think that Champagne and many other older wine regions kind of have to blend that tradition and innovation together to make things work well. But I was going to ask you about this because I love this because, obviously the red sash makes it so ideal for the Derby. And then when I knew that it had a new bottle design, but then I picked it up, I'm like, oh, my thumb goes right there. This is so cool. It's like an indentation just to be able to pour it without, doing the little slip. So I love that new design. It's really, really beautiful. So I'd love to kind of taste through this, but you said that you mainly focus on Pinot Noir. What else are you blending in here?
So in this particular blend, it being our flagship wine, that is, kind of where we are around the world in terms of what we're known for, that's made of 45% Pinot Noir. So then we do 30 Chardonnay and 25 Meunier, because of course, each one of those really acts as a building block and a bridge between the other. So Pinot Noir giving it that power and structure, which is kind of our house style, but then the Chardonnay Chardonnay can add the elegance, a little bit of minerality, maybe a bit of citrus lift. And then of course, Meunier has that really nice ripeness and fleshy character, which brings both of those other grapes together. So, and it's at 8 grams per liter, so still very much in that brut category, which makes it nice and smooth with those tiny, tiny little bubbles after being aged for 2.5 years on the lees.
Oh, it's beautiful. And before we taste it though, tell me about your glass. Looks larger than mine.
Oh,
Some little
a couple of different types of glassware. Another way that we try to innovate, we're kind of looking outside and inside the champagne category in its typical form. So in fine dining and of course with pairings, but then also in cocktail culture. So we also have a glass called the Julep. So you could do either one of these really, but I love a glass that has a little bit wider of a bowl so that I can really get my nose in there. You can swirl it. You can see those beautiful bubbles and that color. And then you just get so many more layers of that inherent complexity, because sometimes we forget that champagne at its core is a wine and that we should think about it in that way rather than just as something for celebration.
Right. That's very true. Well, let's taste this and talk a little bit because we are celebrating, but let's talk about kind of the flavor profile we get as we go through this.
Every time I taste it, I love it even more. I've been working with these wines for 4 years now, so I'm not sick of them yet.
Yep, good. Keep going. Keep going.
I love about this wine. So again, we talked about those tiny, tiny bubbles, and that really makes for that creamy consistency, which I think allows you to then actually taste the rest of the layers of flavor. Now we have a lot of beautiful fruit here. So I like to think of, maybe some stone fruits like peaches and apricots. So like those really unctuous types of fruit. But then you also get like a little bit of the honey and then maybe some yeast on the end as well from that additional aging time. But I think that the Pinot Noir definitely brings some cool red fruits as well. If you tasting this one, you get maybe some strawberries, maybe some raspberry, with the rosé as well. Sometimes I get cranberry, so definitely consistent between the two cuvées for like kind of those tart red fruits.
Yeah, I get a lot of those tart red fruits, but it is the texture that I think stands out the most with this champagne. It's really quite beautiful. And I know, obviously, I'm a big champagne person. Oh, and there you are, see, with the red sash. And this is you 4 years ago, 3 years ago?
That is me 2 years ago, yes.
We've
been a part of the Kentucky Derby now for 5 years, and I had the pleasure of being a host for the last 2. And it was such an incredible experience to be there at Churchill Downs, to see the winner's circle. That we would give them a 6-liter or a 3-liter to be able to use in the winner's circle, because of course that is one of the most iconic moments.
Yeah. I found a 6-liter in my cellar, so
Exactly. I mean, it's obviously, if you're going to do it, you may as well go big, and I think a Methuselah is the right way to go.
Yeah, of course. But yeah, that's beautiful, and I love again the red sash with the red roses. I think that it's a beautiful mix, and this is obviously lovely on its own. But I know that kind of one of the classic cocktails is the French 75. What makes a good French 75 in your?
So the French 75 is actually a very easy cocktail to make, and you can use a couple of different spirits as a base depending on your personal preference. I like to use gin. So if you do gin with lemon juice and a bit of simple syrup, and then after you incorporate and shake those ingredients and strain into your glass, then you then top with a little bit of champagne, usually around 2 ounces. And the citrus and that little bit of simple, and then of course with those really great herbal notes from the gin, just adds a really great, refreshing, easy to make cocktail.
Okay, that is, yeah. And the key is always add the champagne after shaking.
After, yes. We don't want to shake the bubbles out of the concoction. You want to add the bubbles to the concoction.
Oh, delicious. Okay, good. Good to know. I'm going to have to work on my French 75 methodology. So, well, thank you so much for sharing. Thank you again so much for being here too. We really appreciate being here to share this story and these bubbles. They're delicious.
Cheers.
Okay, cheers. We are going to move on to Washington State with Bob Berteau. Bob, hello.
Good afternoon or good evening, depending on where you are.
Where we are. Thank you so much for being here. It's really lovely.
My pleasure. I'm kind of a horse race fan at heart, so this is really kind of natural for me.
Perfect. Well, we're having 2 classics from Chateau Ste. Michelle, the Chardonnay and the Cold Creek Vineyard Cabernet Sauvignon. But I wanted to kind of just get into a little bit of history about Chateau Ste. Michelle, because it's kind of a pioneer in Washington wine. And so when was the first vineyard planted for Chateau Ste. Michelle?
The history of the winery and the company goes all the way back to the 1930s, actually. There was a company called Nawaco, National Wine Company, that this was based off of. But back then, there wasn't a lot of table wine. It was a lot of dessert wine and fortified, which is what was kind of selling in those days. The second really true stage in the beginning of what we call the vinifera stage of the winery was 1967, when the name Saint Michel was formed. And then we built our chateau here in Woodinville, Washington in 1976. And then it became, there it is, there's our chateau. And then it became known as Chateau Saint Michel once we built the chateau. So the name Saint Michel is over 50 years old. We had our 50th anniversary a few years ago. And the chateau will be approaching its 50th anniversary here in just a couple of years.
That's fantastic. It doesn't look 70s at all to me. So well done.
Oh, it was patterned after it to be a French-like chateau. Back then, you wanted to seem old world, and right. So we did. We definitely patterned it after that. Yeah, but we really did found the wine industry here in Washington State. Mm. We kind of consider ourselves the patriarch and the matriarch at the same time, and we take that stand seriously, because a lot of people's first exposure to Washington State wine is our brand. So we take that to heart.
Good. And a lot of people, when they think of Washington State, though, they think of rain. But
they do.
Washington
State
is quite different. There's a lovely mountain range called the Cascades, which separates what most people think of Washington to the majority of the state. So that dry. Tell us how that works.
Yeah, we have two stereotypes we overcome. One is that we're not on the Potomac. We're not on the east side of the country. That's the first Washington we have to get past.
I always say Washington State. Yeah.
Right, exactly, right. And then the second one is that, we're growing grapes in the rain. We must be growing grapes outside Seattle. Well, that's totally true. We have two totally different climates in Washington State. The state is literally separated by the Cascade Mountains, which include one of the more famous mountains, Mount Rainier. And you go from Western Washington, which it's drizzly and what I call perpetually threatening rain all the time, which is where I live. And then I drive 4 hours over the mountains and I enter this area. This is actually our Cold Creek Vineyard. And you can see all around it, we are not in Seattle. No. So this is more of a high desert arid climate that we control all the water. It's a perfect combination of access to plenty of water in the mountains because of the snowpack up there. It feeds the vineyards and the apple trees and peaches and hops and a lot of other crops we grow in Washington State. And yet we can control in the water. So obviously everything is irrigated because of how dry it is. But as winemakers and vineyard managers, we can control that and put just the right amount of water on just the right varietal in each place.
Fantastic. And so Chardonnay, we're going to taste the Chardonnay first. I actually put my glass in the fridge. Hold on. Sorry. Totally forgot I did that. So we're going to taste the Chardonnay first. And when was the first vintage of Chardonnay that you did?
First vintage was in Chateau is the mid 1970s, which is about the same time as we planted the vineyard that you just saw. Cold Creek was planted in 1972. So, and there are some of the oldest vineyards in Washington State that are still in existence. So I kind of like to say the Washington wine industry is about as old as I am. And so we're really at the end of our first generation of grape growing and understanding what grapes grow in what regions. Our next elevation of knowledge is going to be not just that we're Washington State, but we have 13 other different, what we call sub-regions that are all different. Just like California has different regions to grow grapes, we have our own. So that's kind of the next stage of education in terms of kind of showing people what Washington State is all about.
Great. And this Chardonnay, I feel like, is a classic of yours, and it's a classic style. So can you talk us through this flavor profile, where it's coming from?
Yeah, this is the kind of the Chard I say I want my cake and eat it too. So I want this wine to be super easy and by the glass. And if you don't want to think about it, you just want a nice glass of Chardonnay and white wine. You drink, you go, wow, that's soft and easy and fresh. And I want a second glass, or I want a second bottle, hopefully. Okay. But on top of that, we also do this wine with a lot of barrel fermentation as well. It's about 50% barrel fermentation and 50% stainless. So the stainless gives you the bright freshness. You get more of that, the apples and a little bit of a pear spice to it. And then the barrels give you the texture and a little bit of that creaminess and definitely the mouthfeel on the palate. So again, I want freshness and ease of drink. And yet I also want it to be more complex and interesting than the other Chardonnays in this price point.
I get that. I see that, because it does have that just easiness where I don't have to think too much. But if I wanted to, I could.
I mean, wine shouldn't be something you have to think about. But yet, if you want to talk about the nuance and how we make it, I always say wine education can go as far as you want to take it. If you just want to know what wine you like, that's great. That's all you need to know. But if you want to understand a little bit more about the grape growing and the winemaking, we've always got lots of educational tools for everybody.
That's right. This is beautiful. It is a classic, wonderful Chardonnay that just gives you kind of all those different layers. So it's quite pretty.
I call Chardonnay it's a winemaker sculpture, because the Chardonnay grape really is not that varietal. If you go out to the vineyards and you're tasting grapes, if you taste Riesling or Gewürztraminer or Muscat, you go, wow, I can taste what the wine's going to be like. But with Chardonnay, it's really more about winemaking and nuance and texture and complexity more than just, wow, I taste a Chardonnay grape. So that's why we enjoy, because it really does allow the winemakers kind of style and talents to come through.
I call it the chicken of the wine world. It really depends on what you do to it, right? Okay, so let's move on to the red. This red, the Cabernet, a grape that's just thriving in Washington and doing so well. This comes from the Cold Creek Vineyard. Tell us a little bit about that vineyard. We saw a photo of it. Obviously, it's very dry in that desert region. What about that vineyard makes it so
1972, just to take you back to that era, this vineyard, when it was first planted, was 500 acres, okay? That actually doubled the total acreage of Washington state plantings at that time. This one vineyard doubled the entire state all in one vineyard. So it shows how much of I say a risk, but certainly it was a new idea to grow that amount of fruit in one place in Washington state. And back then we didn't really know what was going to grow well in this region. So we had all kinds of varietals planted at Cold Creek back in the day. It's Sauvignon Blanc and Muscat and Grenache and Syrah and Cab and Chard and everything. And now we've learned it really is a Cab area. So as we've grown Cold Creek, we planted more Cabernet Sauvignon than other varieties. I call this wine my steakhouse red. Whenever I go into an account that serves meat, protein, this is the bottle I want to have, because this wine is screaming for your tailgate barbecue. So hopefully if some of you are doing a little tailgate pre-Kentucky Derby, throwing a couple of steaks on the Barbie or whatever protein yours of choice, this kind of wine really, really enjoys a meal and enjoys rich food.
That is
nice combo of kind of a boysenberry jam, a little bit of vanilla from a little bit of the barrels. And you can tell it's really rich and flavorful. It's almost screaming for some protein or cheese in your mouth at the same time.
Right, absolutely. Yeah, I'm thinking like that kind of the tri-tip or the roasted, something slow roasted on the grill, or ribs, something like that really can offset all that fruit and structure.
Or lamb. I really like lamb with the Cold Creek Cab too. It's a good pairing.
That's good. Yeah, that's wonderful. Love it. So thank you for sharing these. These are two wonderful, I think, classic Washington State wines. And I do think that people are introduced to Washington State from your wines. And I think that's a fantastic thing, because then they're gonna just keep coming back for more.
Yeah, and hopefully people search us out, and then once they try them, they will try other Washington State wines as well too, because we're kind of selling our whole region, not just our brand. Sometimes we want to sell people and show people what we can do in terms of wine out here.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of Washington State. I always encourage people who are big fans of California wines to give, nothing wrong with California wines, but to give Washington State, because the value, the quality value there is just phenomenal. And there's just so many interesting things coming out of there. And like you said, everybody's kind of finding the place for each variety to really then, dig in, I guess, pun intended.
We're up to 14 different subregions, what we call AVAs. So we're growing at about one a year as we find all these amazing places to grow grapes. And they're more specific about a varietal in a region that we're focusing on now, which is really fantastic.
That is great. Thank you again, Bob, both for being here, sharing these wines. They are fantastic. Love them. Okay, we are going to move on to bourbon. As a Virginia girl, I'm excited about this. So Woodford Reserve, Chris, could you tell us a little bit about the history of Woodford Reserve? Because it's over 200 years old, and it's now a national landmark, which is amazing.
Yes, Gwen. Distilling began on our distillery site back in 1812. The original distillery is in ruins, and our current distillery, as everyone can see, was built in 1838. It's the oldest distilling building that's still in operation in the U.S. And as you noted, it is a national landmark, so we're very, very proud of that. And so much of history and whiskey innovation occurred in that very building in the 1840s and 50s that literally modern bourbon was defined at what is now the Woodford Reserve Distillery.
Yeah, that is beautiful. I love the barrels and everything that kind of goes with that. What goes into creating Woodford Reserve? The grains, the process. Tell us a little bit about how we get to what's
Yes,
in the bottle.
they're very different than the grape varietals that go into the mums and the Chateau Saint Michelle. We're made with grain, native corn, rye, and malted barley are our core. We of course cook or mash, as we call that, with our unique limestone water from our own spring system. We ferment with our unique strain of yeast and old cypress fermenters, and we distill in copper pot stills and mature in new American white oak barrels that have been charred on the inside. So we very much have a different style of processing or development than do wines and champagnes.
Right. And what is the legal percentage for corn? Is it 60% for bourbon?
No,
Or just over
a minimum of 51% is
Okay.
required, and no bourbon is that low. We're very low at 72% corn. We're 18% rye, which is a high rye recipe, and 10% malted barley.
Okay, so those are the things that are going into making this amazing. Yeah, I love this, and I'm a fan of rye, so maybe that's why this is one of my favorite bourbons. But yeah, going to school in Virginia, I drank a lot of bourbon, and I remember Woodford Reserve was always the one that we felt very privileged to be able to drink. So I'd love to taste this. What is your favorite? Do you enjoy it neat? Do you like it with the cube? How do you usually drink your?
Well, I'm one for enjoying Woodford Reserve on the rocks. I like lots of ice in my glass. Of course, some people like it neat, and that to me is the ultimate test. If you can't enjoy Woodford Reserve neat, we've done something wrong. So it's one of those stair-step bourbons. You start neat, rocks, splash of water, and then that leads you to any type of cocktail. We're great in old fashions, we're great in Manhattans, and of course, we're great in mint juleps.
Mint juleps. Okay, well, I would love to taste it neat. Well, I had a rock in there. It's kind of melted a little bit because that's my style. But if you have something to taste, or you can just walk us through it while we're tasting, just kind of what
Yes.
those aromas and what's coming out, the typical
Yes.
characteristics.
Yes, this is the most complex of all bourbons, proven scientifically as well as by the human senses. And all the wonderful flavors and aromas we heard from the mums and the two Chateau Saint Michelle, every one of those fruit characteristics is in this glass. Those oak characteristics are in this glass, plus more. This has a tremendous amount of spice, the warm brown cooking spices, bacon spices like clove and cinnamon and nutmeg, green spices like anisette and mint. It certainly is rich in fruit. Every fruit we heard mentioned earlier, plus lots of tropical fruit and citrus fruit. We have a tremendous array of sweet aromatics from our new barrel use: caramel, vanilla, butterscotch, chocolate, honey, the list goes on. Wonderful wood characteristics such as hazelnut, almond, pecan, walnut, various degrees of oak, cedar, pine, and then the grain notes themselves. So we have a tremendous complex flavor profile that is presented in balance. And that's been the key to the success of Woodford Reserve. You find in it what you like.
Right, and I think that's so similar to wine. It's the looking for the balance, and
Yes.
terribly balanced. I think I put my cube in at exactly the right time because it's tasting just so beautiful. And I'm not very good at neat or even on the rocks. It's just a little bit too.
And
Sometimes too much.
everybody needs to find their own way. Yes.
Oh, this is absolutely beautiful though. And it has all those things. I love that honey, the caramel, the chocolate, all those things kind of coming in. I did want to also ask a little bit about the bottle though, because as a sponsor of the Kentucky Derby, you have that bottle.
Yes.
Beautiful bottle with art on it. We have this Wine.com has this available in some markets, not every market, but it's great that you have and you have even 146 because it's the 146 Derby here.
Yes.
Coming on this bottle. Tell us a little bit about the artwork here that comes to it.
Well, this is our 21st Kentucky Derby commemorative bottle. Each one has had unique artwork on it from a real artist, and it varies from year to year. And we've had some terrific artists like Leroy Neiman, but very special to us, we have a local artist again this year, and it's Richard Sullivan, who grew up in Louisville, and he went to play professional baseball, of all things, for 6 years, but he was an artist at heart. So he's returned to his second love after baseball, art. And Richard has made, that's a watercolor. That's an 8-foot wide watercolor that's been scaled down for the bottle. And Richard has done a terrific job of horses coming down the straightway. So he is a great artist, great future ahead of him. And again, each year for 21 years, we've had another special artwork on the bottle.
How special. So every year we have the commemorative bottle, and I love that. And it is the same, just for everybody out there, it is the same bourbon, just in a unique.
Yes, it's our classic Woodford Reserve bourbon, but with that special celebratory bottle.
That is beautiful. I love it. I love the watercolor. And baseball and art. I don't always put those together, but it's a good story. it's a good mix. So we have talked a little bit about the classic Kentucky Derby drink, the mint julep. Can you give us maybe either your favorite recipe for this, or just how do you like your julep? What makes a good mint julep?
Oh, yes. The mint julep is one of those really interesting drinks that you really have to make it for yourself. And it's a fun drink if you're having a derby party at home and you need to ask your guests, what do you like? Because it can be too minty, too sweet. Again, you need to make it for yourself. But it is a historic drink that has been made since the 1770s in Kentucky. And you ideally have a beautiful metal cup, like I have this silver-plated pewter cup. And you start with putting a couple mint leaves in the cup, and that's where you start controlling the mint. Do you crush it? Do you just rub it around the lip of the cup and drop it in? You be the judge of that. And on top of that, you add some powdered sugar and a jigger of water, or maybe you have simple syrup already made up. Stir that in with the mint, and then add crushed ice. And you fill the cup about full. But then you add your sipping straw and a sprig of mint right next to the straw before you pour in 2 ounces of Woodford Reserve. And that'll settle the ice. And then you top off with more ice. And it's that very simple to make. And you drink your julep through the straw. In fact, most people don't realize the sipping straw was invented for the mint julep. You drink it through a straw. It's just a classic drink. And again, it's a lot of fun to make, and make it the way you like it.
That is fantastic. I love the descriptions of each, because it's a simple recipe, but the layers and how you do it is important. So I really like that. I love a lot of mint over syrup. So
yes.
Mint girl, but that's absolutely delicious. So I think the last thing, so thank you for sharing all of these wines and the bourbon, of course, is to talk about our Derby picks. We've got a race tomorrow. Hopefully, if you've been paying attention, we thought maybe there might be some picks. Apparently, there are 2 scratched. I'm still learning all my terms, but Elise, why don't we start with you? Do you have a winner in mind?
I do, and the reason why I picked this horse is for a few reasons, but I am going for horse number 18. His name is Authentic. And the reason for that is I love the idea of authenticity. So just like with GH Mom, we try to stay true to our house style through every year, creating our champagnes. And then unbridled potential. He's been in a few races, a couple of shorter ones, but I think that he definitely has all of that raw talent to be able to show, just like GH Mom does in the US market. And then the last thing is sustainability. So if he can sustain his speed and really kind of get himself on the inside rail, I think that he definitely has a great chance to win, just like we like to use sustainable practices in our vineyards.
Oh my God, I like all the comparisons. I'm just looking and be like, what name do I like the best? So I love that. Well thought out. Fantastic. Bob, I know you said you're a horse guy. So
yeah, I've been to the track a few times in my day. Matter of fact, my wife's from Southern California and used to go down to Santa Anita quite regularly. Matter of fact, we went to the Rose Bowl a couple of years ago and snuck over to Santa Anita on the same trip. So I've got a couple of different ideas here. My one pick to win is a horse called Honor AP, because it is, again, I'm a West Coast guy. This is a horse coming out of Bob Baffert's stable, who's one of the most famous trainers of all time. And he's coming out fresh off of the Santa Anita Derby victory. So I think that combination looks really, really good. And also, I mean, the favorite Tis the Law is like 3 to 5 right now. And even though he might win, it's hard to make any money at 3 to 5. So I'm looking for something with a little, this horse is like 5 to 1, this honor AP. So, and again, coming out from the West Coast. And my other bet, there's a bet called an exacta where you pick the first 2 horses, you pick 1 and 2. So I've got a 3-horse box, which means any of these 3 horses can come in first or second and you win the exacta pool. I've got my horse, Honor AP, with the favorite, Tis the Law, and then I throw in a little bit of a long shot to try and make some money. I looked over the long shots, and I like the 7-horse called Money Moves, also a good name to try and make some money, okay?
That's Mike's favorite, just FYI.
So that's my 3-horse exacta box, 7, 16, 17, which that's some big numbers in the Kentucky Derby. So those are my picks, and I'm going to place them soon.
Fantastic. Good. I think you've just inspired Mike to maybe do the same. It's like money moves. I like money moves into my account. It's great. Yeah. Fantastic. Good to know. Okay. And Chris, I know you've been doing this for a while, at least sponsoring. So what about you on the track?
Oh, yes. Well, my tradition, I've always picked the winner because I put a bet on each and every horse in the race. But authentic. I'm also going with authentic, and the post position looks good. So I'm authentic. That's the bet.
All right, good. I did a little bit of research because I don't do a lot of betting, but I liked 1,000 Words, one because it came from that same trainer, and I like the name 1,000 Words. I feel like it's 1,000 words. It just reminds me of reading and literacy. I don't know, yeah, we'll see. I don't know. I'm definitely watching tomorrow. I'm really excited to see what happens, but I love the energy behind all of your picks. So thank you all so much for being here. The wines are wonderful. I'll be continuing to enjoy them tomorrow. The bourbon, hopefully will last a little bit longer for us here, but maybe making some mint juleps for us and our neighbors tomorrow. So grateful for your energy and your time and giving us delicious wine and delicious bourbon to enjoy. So I hope you all love this while you watch the race. For those of you at home, if you weren't able to grab this set, I encourage you to do so. It's even if you're not watching horse racing, they're all delicious wines and still there on Wine.com. And I'm looking forward to see what happens tomorrow. So thank you all again. Stay safe and well.
Cheers.
Cheers.
One.
Run for the roses. Roses.
Woohoo! Woohoo!
It's both a science and a form of high art. It's made from the combination of grapes, sunlight, rain, soil, and time. It's raised up in the moments that matter. It's wine. And we are Wine.com. We have the largest wine selection in the world, online sommeliers with free advice, and now our powerful new app puts the entire world of wine in your hands. Wine.com. Seriously passionate about wine. Download our free app today.